Folks, I thought I'd do a review of the last few minutes of the session that I did on Google just for the people that didn't get the longer version. If you remember, in the lower right-hand corner, I keep track of the time, and it got stuck. And I've actually seen that happen a couple times since, now that I'm looking for it. And so I wanted to do a review of this for people who wanted a longer version and a more comfortable version. So it'll take 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it takes to go over this. We were talking about how to do faster Google SEO. That is, how to get ranked higher in Google by using video. And the idea is to create a YouTube video, and then you want to make sure that it shows up for your customers when they go looking for your kind of product. Now, what most people do is they just set up a title for the video and make it something simple. And you really should put a little more thought into that, because the title that you use for a video has a tremendous impact on where that video ranks. And let's take a look at a specific example. Let's say that you were selling life insurance in East Hartford, Connecticut. Now, if you try to rank for just insurance and you create a video and you just say insurance for the title, you're going to be competing with anybody who has a website that's related at all to insurance, and you're certainly going to get beaten by Prudential and Aetna and Geico and all the other big companies. But if you sell life insurance in East Hartford and you put that in the title of the video, and it can maybe just say Life Insurance East Hartford, then Google thinks that that video is about life insurance, which makes sense. And if people go looking in Google for life insurance East Hartford, Connecticut, your video is more likely to show up. And let me show you a specific example of where I did this a couple years ago. At the top of the page, notice that I've said life insurance East Hartford, Connecticut. Then if you take a look at the search results, the top three, which are actually in sort of a yellowish area and says ads in the upper right-hand corner, those are paid ads. The match after that is mine. Notice it says Life Insurance East Hartford, Connecticut, and it's a video of me. And it's a video I made in January of 2010. Still shows up #1 in the organic rankings. It's only 43 seconds long, and it's only got it's got a couple of hundred views, I believe. I haven't taken a look at it recently. But the bottom line is, it got ranked because I put those keywords in there, and it got ranked higher than tons of other web pages that are there below it. You can go look in Google for that right now to see the exact same thing. And the video basically says, hey, look, I don't do life insurance, and I don't live in Connecticut, so how come I'm ranked here and you're not? And I did that for a group of insurance people that I was doing a speech for. And I wanted to tell them that, hey, they ought to be doing this. So the bottom line is that if you sell oversized refrigerators, industrial refrigerators in Detroit, Michigan, and you have a batch that you want to sell, one of the things you ought to consider is doing a short video where you explain what you have to sell and say oversized refrigerators in Detroit, Michigan. And that way, if a person goes searching for that, maybe you show up. Now, this won't work for all products in all cases, but it may work for some. And so I wanted you to know this little trick. Okay. On the next page, I just show a piece of the video, and I just called it El Cheapo Video, and it was, you can take a look at it if you want. It's just 43 seconds of me saying, hey, you really should be here for your product. All right. Now, whether or not your video gets to rank depends on the competition. Like I said, if you make the title of your video insurance, or if in your case you make it assets, then you're not going to rank highly because you're going to be competing with too many other people that have web pages about assets. But if you niche yourself a little bit better, again, like oversized refrigerators, Detroit, Michigan, or dock levelers, Chicago, Illinois, then you're more likely to rank highly in Google if you set up the right title for your video. I recommend that you use video for TV commercials. That is, your own 30-second snippets on what your company does or what you do or a specific product that you're selling. And I also recommend that you do it for testimonials, where your customers say how much they like working with you. Here's the big mistake that everybody makes, is that they wait for a perfect video. They wait for the perfect camera and the perfect lighting and the perfect outfit on the perfect day. Here's a much better idea, in my opinion. Just get some kind of hand camera, and you can almost do it with your phone, although you're better off if you get one of these $200 hand cameras, and just do a simple video with that. And that will give you the opportunity to at least get online and get in the game and compete with the other people that are selling the product that you're selling. All right. Now I want to talk about how you choose the keywords to optimize for. And I've already given a couple of examples like life insurance East Hartford, Connecticut, or oversized refrigerators Detroit, Michigan, or dock levelers in Chicago, Illinois. Now I want to tell you an example of where another group made a big mistake. And it wasn't with video, but it was in setting up the title of a newspaper article. And I want to show you the mistake they made and how you could avoid that mistake. You'll probably remember this example where Captain Sullenberger landed a plane. And if you think about that story when it happened in New York, think about the way that that story tended to get passed around. People tended to say to each other, hey, did you hear about blah, blah, blah? And I want you to think about the words that people would have said to you or the words you would have said to somebody else. And I want you to take 30 seconds and write down those words. Okay, you can stop this if you want, but I'm going to continue. All right. The words you probably would have used are plane, airplane, birds, because if you remember, he hit a bunch of birds, and that's why the plane crashed. Crash would be another word. Hudson River. Any of those might be reasonable words. Okay. Here is how you choose the keywords to optimize for. If you take a look at the example of the New York Times, they made a huge mistake. If you take a look at their title, which is in the middle of the page, they made the title of their article, Pilot is Hailed After Jetliner's Icy Plunge. Well, if you think about that, nobody's going to use any of those words to look this up. So the bottom line is that this article hardly got read at all. And if you remember, and it's actually shown down below, the date was early 2009. And almost nobody read this article because, unless they were specifically looking at the New York Times for this specific story. But for the people who went to Google and they looked for crash, airplane, Hudson, etc., those people all ended up getting other articles, and the most famous article that most people got was one by the LA Times. And this ended up being a big story in search engine optimization, that the LA Times actually got much more attention for this story than the New York Times for something that happened in New York. And the fact is, they made a huge mistake in terms of setting up their title. So, you want to think about what words you should put in your titles. Well, how could you have found how many people use the word jetliner versus how many people use the word plane? Start by making an educated guess. Then you can check a tool called the Google AdWords Keyword Tool, which is free. And by the way, if you do a Google search for Google AdWords Keyword Tool, you can also find it, but I show you the exact address here. All right. Then if you take a look at the next page, I show how to actually use Google and find this tool. And then, when I use the tool, I look up the word jetliner. And if you take a look in the middle, over on the right, it gives you what are called local monthly searches. And notice that number is 14,800. When they say local, they actually mean in the United States. But they also show you common words down below, like jet airplane. So we're going to get an even better one in just a moment. But notice, there are 14,800 matches for jetliner. Now, if we take a look at the next slide, if we looked up airplane, let's take a look in the middle there. Over on the right, local monthly searches is 11,000. So almost 1,000 times as many as the 14,000 matches for jetliner. So the bottom line is hardly anyone uses the word jetliner when they do a Google search. So the New York Times would have been much smarter if they'd used the word airplane in their title. Again, they were doing a newspaper article, but whether you're doing a newspaper article or a blog entry or a video, that's what we're talking about now, regardless, the title is the most important thing that you give Google from an SEO point of view. So, If you'd looked up the appropriate words, I think you would have found that you should have said something like airplane crashes in Hudson, or airplane hits birds and crashes in Hudson, or plane crashes in Hudson after hitting birds, etc. And if you'd done any of those, and you were a major publication, you would have beaten the New York Times. Now, the New York Times obviously has a great deal of credibility from a Google point of view, so Google will tend to rank some of its articles more highly anyways. But the bottom line is that if you are in competition with somebody else in your business, and you use words that are smarter than theirs in your titles of your videos, you're probably going to rank higher. Okay, next page you can see that for the word plane, also 11,000 matches. Okay, quick joke, because I actually did this joke in the session. Woman comes home to her husband and says, honey, I think there's water in the carburetor. Husband says, you don't know anything about cars. She says, I'm telling you, there's water in the carburetor. And he says, you wouldn't know a carburetor from an alternator. She says, I'm telling you, I think there's water in the carburetor. And he says, okay, where's the car? And she says, in the pool. I'll stop 30 seconds for you to laugh. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about blogging. A blog or a weblog is essentially like your own newspaper or your own diary or your own set of letters or whatever you want to call it. And they're actually pretty easy to set up, and you could use them to advertise the things that you sell. Now, if you want to do it on the cheap, you can just go to WordPress.com and set one up yourself. There are other ways that you can spend hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to make a more complicated blog, but you probably don't have to spend more than $500 of company money to get a decent blog site set up. The important thing is that when you create your blog entries, be careful of the titles of your articles. Those are critical. So if you were selling a dock leveler DL321 in Boston, make sure those words are in the title of your blog entry. Don't have your blog entry just say, great sale today, because Google will think that's a good match for a great sale today, and you're going to be competing with anybody who is saying great sale today. If you know that your clients might look for dock leveler, Boston, Mass., you want to make sure that those words are in your title so that there's a match from Google's point of view. Here's a bad example of doing that. And this was actually done by a friend of mine named Tim Moore. And he was actually the social media guy for the New York Times a few years ago. He was selling a second home in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he even sent out a bunch of requests to friends saying, hey, look, I'm going to set up this blog. Can you make a bunch of comments? Because if a blog entry has a lot of comments, Google thinks it must be a useful blog entry. All right, so I want you to take 20 seconds, think about the words you would put in a title if you were selling a second home in Charlotte, North Carolina. Pause the tape if necessary. Okay. You could use one of a variety of words, but people might say home or house. They certainly should say Charlotte, North Carolina. They might say 2-bedroom, 4-bedroom, or waterfront, or anything like that. Here's what I want to show as a bad example. Tim made his title, Can Lightning Strike Twice? And the reason is that he had previously sold a home using social media. Well, the problem is, Google is going to think that that blog entry is about lightning and about striking and lightning striking twice. And so I think he really missed the boat in terms of getting a lot of attention for this blog entry, because the only people that saw it were people who told each other about the blog entry itself. He wasn't being found by people doing searches in Google. And here's the actual article, and it was in his new big blog, and notice in the middle there's the title. All right, those were the things I wanted to spend a little bit more time on in finishing up. Realize that we had a handout. You're looking at it, or you've probably seen it already, but it's been on my website since the day that I did the speech, and it's at www.617patrick.com/IR for investmentrecovery.html. I will also be sending you a LinkedIn invitation, as you know, and then we went through the conclusions. Bottom line, in terms of the conclusions, Google allows you to do paid ads, and we spent a little bit of time talking about that. But the better way is to try to get yourself ranked for free. And that's called Google Search Engine Optimization. And the easiest way to do it is through video. Blogging can also be useful. You should choose smart keywords. I realized I changed it. I left it at mart keywords, and that's actually a legitimate word, so spell check, I didn't catch it. And if you get found, you are more likely to make money. All right? Thank you very much. And again, apologies for not for having the session run out before the time was done. All right? Thanks. Bye-bye.